credit. The Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. It's also home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Toronto was covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with the Mississaugas and the Chippewa bands. My riding of Sudbury is within the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory of 1850. We reside within the Atikoshim-Anishinaabe Treaty Territory. There are several First Nations from Ontario that have been joined here. I'll be introducing them shortly. And they have brought fast-track litigation in Superior Court to kill Bills 5 and C5, the provincial Bill 5 and C5 is the federal one, on the basis that it severely threatened the rights to self-determine their ways of life on the homeland territories, the environment, and fundamental human freedoms. Both of the 5s, provincial and federal, were introduced to push forward massive economic developments without the necessary information to understand and address what could be serious negative impacts, and without including First Nations, whose lands these projects will be built on and take up in much, if any, of the decision-making processes. The waiver of protective rules and the ignoring of First Nation rights means that these bills are unconstitutional and must be struck down. Skip over, this is comments I might save for the end. I want to recognize the guests that we're joined by. Kate Kempton, Senior Counselor for Woodward and Company Lawyers, LLP. Chief Tanya Simpson from Alderville First Nation. Chief June Black from Apatipi Anishinaabeg Nation. Chief Sherry Taylor from Ginagaming First Nation. And Chief Todd Cornelius from Oneida Nation of the Thames. Apologies, I don't know who's speaking first. You are? Okay. Kate, I'll invite Kate up to the podium. And so what I'll do is, I'm just going to stand back here.
Great. Breathing behind my neck, are you? Okay. Sorry. All right. My name's Kate Kempton, Senior Counsel, Woodward and Company Lawyers, litigating on behalf of 9 First Nations, 4 of whom chiefs represented here today, in a case called an application. It's not a lawsuit, it's a fast-track case to strike down Bill 5 in its entirety, the Ontario version, Protect Ontario by Unleashing its Economy Act, and key parts of Bill C5, Building Canada Act, the federal version. I want to start by saying 4 words, and I'm going to repeat them. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. We need to take this seriously. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. These 2 bills, while Bill 5, the provincial version, is in some ways far, far worse than the federal version and has all kinds of fundamental flaws to it, the ways in which they're common are that way. Both laws, the Building Canada Act and Bill 5, give their respective cabinets and ministers unfettered, unlimited authority to wave a magic wand in any instance when approving a project or what could be a vast area of land or zone for multiple projects, to say that a bunch of other laws are not going to apply. Unfettered, unrestricted power of cabinet to say that laws that provide for assessments and fact gathering to understand the potential impacts of major projects and how to address them. Laws that require proponents typically to apply for various permits and approvals and undergo sometimes a rigorous process in that application by which they're subject to a bunch of conditions. Laws that provide for human rights and environmental protections of all sorts, and laws that today would require and mandate the Crown governments, Ontario and Canada, to engage First Nations in the decision-making process, are all able to be struck in application in any of these projects. So the Cabinet can say, we can ignore all of these laws. We have absolute power to decide for ourselves that we're going to ignore all of these laws in approving these projects. we think the general public should be alarmed by this. These laws were purportedly brought in to address the threats from south of the border of the Trump administration. And yet they are structured in ways that we become what we say we're threatened by. We become the very thing we say we're fighting against. We become a place of not caring about human rights, environmental protections, the costs of projects. Nobody here, none of the First Nations are seeking, and this case is not seeking to say that economic development is bad. We're not saying that decision-making on economic development shouldn't be streamlined and made faster. It should. It should. Both sets of governments suffer from massive bureaucratic inertia. Layers and layers and layers of people sitting at desks, unincentivized to be creative, things that have been identified for decades as being a problem, do bog down approvals. It's First Nations who feel that more than anybody else. They're the ones who have requests, demands, claims in for necessities of life, basic housing, drinking water, things that most of us sitting here take for granted. And those claims, demands, and requests get bogged down not for months or years, but decades. We do understand the problem with bureaucracy and delay. That's a problem internal to those governments that they need to fix. You don't fix that problem by imposing the cost of inefficient, bloated government onto First Nations, onto the environment, and onto future generations we're getting to the point now where our future generations, the children we profess to care so much about, will not be able to pay for the costs that we keep passing on to them. Bill C-5 was a bill made in panic, in haste, in fear, purportedly to address the Trump tariffs. But in doing so, we cannot be throwing out the values that Canada supposedly holds dear, or the Constitution that mandates that those values must be followed in every instance. We can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. We can't throw out the essential heart of who we profess to be as if it's extraneous and peripheral. The costs of doing large-scale development must be taken into account and addressed. We can't be developing things despite the costs. Economically, environmentally, humanly, that will come back to bite us, and it will hurt First Nations most. First Nations say that these problems with these bills, the absolute power that corrupts absolutely, that each of these bills gives their respective cabinets, is unconstitutional because First Nations have rights in this country that the rest of us don't. And as I said, all of us should care about this very deeply. But First Nations have rights based not on minority status, but on their stature and status of being the first nations of this land that has been colonized for a couple of centuries. In Canada, we recognize the wrongs done through our Constitution with a commitment to make it right. And that commitment means that the Crown governments are mandated by law, by the Constitution, to make reconciliation happen. Reconciliation means creating space for divergent views, cultures, legal orders, and governments to coexist in mutual peace, to coexist so that one isn't trampling over the other. We still do this very badly in this country. If you go to almost any reserve in Canada now, the circumstances there are far, far, far worse than anywhere else in this country because of what we've done and continue to do. The Crown governments, in order to correct this, have a duty under the Constitution to act honorably, to effect or advance reconciliation. And if any law that any of the Crown governments, provincially or federally, pass that sets back reconciliation, that sets back the ability of First Nations to be involved in the very decisions that will take up, harm, use up their homeland territories, their ways of life on their homeland territories, that can't be honorable. That does not advance reconciliation, and it is therefore unconstitutional. Bill 5 is also far worse in many other ways. It removes a bunch of protections for endangered species, and once they're gone for good. Who do we think we are to be able to pronounce from our ivory tower right here at Queen's Park that this species, and this species are expendable, can just go? First Nations also care more about that, arguably, than the rest of us, because they are embedded in their homeland territory. It's part of their identity, their culture, their economy, their laws. And that environment includes everything in, on, and of it. It's shared with the non-human parts of our planet. We start magically sort of playing a video game and saying, blast, you're gone, blast, you're gone, blast, you're gone. We're playing with their lives. That's unconstitutional. Bill 5 also purports to wipe out the requirement to engage in cultural heritage assessments. First Nations have lost so much of their continuity from the past to the present to the future because of colonialism, including residential schools that kidnapped thousands of children into institutions and caused major rips and tears in the continuity of cultural transmission. The idea that it's okay to simply engage in project development without identifying what that cultural heritage is and protecting it is also unconstitutional. There are many other problems with Bill 5. I started off, or earlier I said that Bill C5 appears to have been created in haste, in panic, knee-jerk reaction to the Trump tariffs by, again, saying we're going to do a bunch of economic development despite the costs. It's the despite the cost part that we're objecting to. Bill 5, the provincial version, let's be clear. This wasn't done in panic or in haste in reaction to the Trump tariffs. This has been the Ford government's plan for 7 years. The record is clear. The Ford government is simply using the Trump tariffs as the latest excuse to bulldoze, and I use that term deliberately, over the environment, First Nations rights, and very lives and ability to survive. Ford has been gunning for the Ring of Fire, the Green Belt, and a bunch of other things since he got into power. This is just the latest in a series of attempts to hide real motivation. We saw a number of them during COVID, where the pandemic was used as an excuse to bulldoze over fundamental values in our Constitution by gutting the Environmental Assessment Act provincially. We see it again here. So let's not be fooled by what's going on here, but look at the content of Bill 5. It is dishonorable and unconstitutional through and through. You know, politics might be about popularity, but law cannot be. Constitutional law is about the continuity of fundamental values that define a society, despite what's popular in the moment or not. And I'm going to finish by reading an email I got yesterday, which is tame compared to a bunch of emails, texts, and other extremely threatening and racist comments that were posted yesterday when the news of this case against both of these bills came out. The title is "You Suck!" 3 exclamation marks. It goes on to say, and I won't name the person here, but it is from a real person. "You and the First Nations are disgusting. The PM meaning Prime Minister, is trying to get us off of the American teat. This country needs pipelines ASAP. You should be sued for $100 million because you harm this country and its prospects for the future. First Nations hat in hand again. Disgusting. If that's what's popular, and if that's what these bills are seeking to appeal to, we don't have much left to stand by. Where's the honor? Politics may be about popularity, but law and the Constitution cannot be. They're about preserving what's right to do, despite some of the sentiment that may exist out there. These laws authorize the Crown governments to do what should always be prohibited. They authorize absolute power to corrupt absolutely. They authorize the trampling over First Nations and their lands. We will pursue this case, and we will come out victorious. And I'm going to start pass the baton by asking Chief Tainer Simpson from Alderville First Nation to come up and say a few words.
My name is Chief Tainer Simpson of Alderville First Nation. I would like to start by thanking Kate for those wonderful comments. This is exactly why we're fighting this bill. I'm from Alderville First Nation, which is one of the 6 Mississauga nations here in Ontario. Here where we are in southern Ontario is our homeland. We have lived here for at least 10,000 years nonstop. We're the only people that have been here for 10,000 years straight, and we're always going to be here. It is our duty to ensure that our lands are protected, that our nature is protected, that our ancestors who are buried all over this territory are protected. When we first heard about Bill 5, we were given a mandate by our citizens to stop this bill at any cost. And this is what we're doing today. We were on Queen's Park just a few weeks ago rallying. Just a couple weeks ago, I was meeting with Premier Ford here in this building, and it doesn't seem that our message is getting through. People don't quite understand why we are against Bill 5. What's so wrong with it? What Bill 5 does is it fast tracks and it overrides the current existing legislation that we have fought so hard that protect these lands already. The problem isn't that that it can't happen fast enough. It can. The problem is that the governments aren't coming and sitting down with us. They're not consulting with us like they're supposed to. So often they'll say, we'll consult with you after the fact. And that's not consultation. That's not duty to consult. We have these laws for a reason. Duty to consult and free, prior, informed consent exist because these are our territories. The treaties never signed away the lands. They were not land surrenders. They were agreements to allow the newcomers to share the land with us. We are still the stewards of this land. Every Canadian should be upset with Bill 5 because it's destroying habitats, it's destroying species, it's allowing things to happen that just should not be allowed to happen. And I think Kate hit the nail on the head when she said that this was always Doug Ford's plan. This isn't a response to Trump's tariffs. This is something that he's always wanted to do, and he finally had a reason to do it. The Crown is proposing to approve a number of major projects and fast track them in a reckless way. Here where we are in just outside of Toronto, there's 3 nuclear power plants that are being worked on right now. There's the Pickering refurbishment, the Darlington new nuclear project, and the new Wesleyville nuclear station that's going to be the largest nuclear power generation station in the world. And this is all in our backyard. This is something that we have been given the mandate to ensure that it's done properly ecologically, environmentally, and to ensure that our ancestors are going to stay where they are. And the rules and regulations are well thought out already. They're in place. It's just a matter of going through those steps to ensure that they have our consultation agreement, to ensure that we have the buy-in. And we were on a track to be doing that. And with these special economic zones being proposed in Bill 5, we see that all being thrown out. We see all those protections that we were fighting to ensure for all Canadians, all Ontarians, not just for us, to ensure that that nuclear station was going to be built properly, to ensure that the 2 Darlington and Pickering projects were going to be done properly. So we can't approve these projects and move forward without considering human and environmental impacts, no matter what the supposed threats to the economy are. The fight that our 9 First Nations are bringing in we're fighting a reckless and dangerous development that impacts our nations and impacts them in significant ways. Permits and approvals that protect the land, water, and species exist for a reason. Protecting and conserving these significant resources and beings cannot be optional. This is the approach that the government is taking, and this approach is what's reckless and dangerous and is what we are fighting back against in this court case. We're not against economic development, we're for economic development. We are looking to increase, the province and Canada, we're looking to increase all First Nations economically, but it has to be done in a smart way. You can't just go in and say, we're gonna do whatever we want, we don't need these regulations that are in place for a reason. And this is what we're here to fight. So we have an inherent right to make these decisions about our lands and waters and to continue our ways of life. So as I said previously, we've always been here, we're always going to be here, and this is our duty as First Nations to protect these lands. Well, I think I might have said enough, and I know there's a few other chiefs that would like to say a few words too, but Miigwech for your time, and we look forward to seeing the Bill 5 repealed. Miigwech.
Good morning. I'm Chief Black, Chief June Black from Abitibi Anishinaabe Nation. Thank you, Kate and Chief, for those words. Bashiki Kwendeshin Akasan Makwan Dudam, Abitibi and Duji, Abitibi Lake. My spirit name is Buffalo Woman. I'm from the Bear Clan, and my traditional territory is the Abitibi Lake region. We've been here since time immemorial. We have a sacred responsibility to protect the lands. What's about to happen is going to be very harmful. Bill 5 and Bill C5 are pieces of legislation that attempt to bulldoze over First Nation rights and lands with no respect for our decision-making and jurisdiction. Ontario and Canada should be working together with us on decisions that are made on our lands. First Nation have a right to self-determination, which is affirmed by the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. We have a right to a way of life on our lands, and that way of life includes decision-making and governance authority. Canada and Ontario cannot continue to make unilateral decisions about development and major projects. We will not and do not tolerate Crown governments taking over our lands in whatever way they want. Crown governments are required to act honorably with respect to all decisions and dealings with First Nations. Speeding through projects and exempting projects from authorizations and approvals is far from honorable. Approving projects without the consent of First Nation peoples who have been on this land forever is even less honorable. Being honorable means advancing reconciliation. These bills from Ontario and Canada show that the Crown has no interest in reconciliation. Again, we have a sacred responsibility to this land. We ask that we be allowed to honor that sacred responsibility given to us by the Creator. Many of us pray, and we pray for you as well, so that you can live on this land. Because I'm telling you, when the water's gone and when everything's poisoned, what are we going to have? We need to work together. We need to support each other. We live in this country together. And the First Nations people have been here, once again, since time immemorial. We must work together. And like my fellow chief said, we're not against economic development. Yes, we need finances to survive in this world. Yes, we do. But we also need the natural resources to survive. That is also very important. So with that, I want to thank you for listening to me. Chimigwech in my language, and God bless you.
Miigwech fellow chiefs. Wapshke Nimki Benesequin Indigenous Ganugamin First Nation. Chief Sherry Taylor. Ogamakwe Ganugamin. I just want to say that I'm not here of my own. I'm here because of my community. I am here for the future of our children. I'm here because our ways of life have to be protected. And I'm here to make sure that our children are going to have a future, and those that are not here yet. Ontario and Canada are supposedly worried about President Trump and are using this as an excuse to further erode and degrade First Nations involvement, engagement, and consent in decision making. Crown governments are showing they are more concerned with the threats of our neighboring president than the threats that First Nations have been facing for centuries. Canada and Ontario must start showing that they need to provide proper infrastructure and economic participation requirements to First Nations. These are the partnerships and initiatives that will protect the economy. We will not allow our rights and decision-making authority to be stomped upon in order to protect the economy at large. We, First Nations, are part of the economy, and our say on the land matters. We will not allow our rights to be trampled on. These bills do that. To me, these bills were developed because as First Nations, we're the red tape. It's to bypass our rights. Focusing on speeding through projects instead of working together in a way that considers and protects our rights, interests, and perspectives will only delay projects further. Canada and Ontario are doing the same thing to First Nations as the US is doing to Canada, and we will not stand for that. Canada and Ontario have an obligation to respect First Nations rights and foster nation-to-nation relations. Bill 5 and Bill C5 not only ignore this obligation, but bulldoze it to the ground. We have our own laws. We have a sacred duty, as our Chief Chun has mentioned here. We do have a sacred obligation, and that is to protect the rights and interests of our people and the environment, the land, the water, the species. Creator gave us that gift to speak on behalf of those that can't speak. And that's my duty as a chief, Ogamakwe, to make sure that I speak up for them. We have our own laws. We have natural laws that our people have followed, and by them having these, having our laws in place for centuries and since time immemorial has sustained us to what we have today, and why we're still standing here today. We really need to work together, and that's what this is all about. It's not about stopping progress or economic, things that we can do together economically, but we need to be at those tables. Our elders often say If you want to do anything, you need to do it right. You know, I've had my grandparents who took care of me as a young little girl, and they always told me, when you do something, do it right. It's going to last forever. And in this sense, this is what we're talking about. We need to be heard. We need to be at those tables, and we need to do things right together. I'd just like to say miigwech, everybody who's listening. Miigwech.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Skoli skogego. Nada sloha ni yungets. Ogwali name get loda. Anadaka nevajuk. Chief Todd Canaris from United Nation of the Thames. Just in regards to Bill 5 and Bill C5, what it has done, it has woken up our youth. They have come to the two rallies here at Queen's Park here. So I'd like to say young go to the youth who are stepping it up. First Nations are not against development. It's already been said a few times. Many First Nations are interested in development. We are against our lands being taken from us and used in ways we do not agree with. We are interested in development that is done the right way. The right way means protecting and conserving the environment, lands, waters, and species. The right way also means full participation in decision-making of First Nations who have the rights on our lands. The case is about bringing this the right way to fall and not allowing the wrong way to continue. If Canada, Ontario, and the Crown governments continue to go about development the wrong way, the reckless way that disregards the environment and First Nations rights, we will be against that kind of development. Bill 5 and Bill C5 have shown that the government is not interested in working together in a way that advances reconciliation and the original treaty promises. We have no choice but to take Ontario and Canada to court for this approach and not showing just how wrong this is. As long as the grass is growing, the rivers are flowing, we're going to be here. Young Go from Chief Todd Canaris, United Nation of the Thames.
Thank you for that. I want to acknowledge that my colleague MPP Alexa Gilmore is here as provincial representative for the riding of Parkdale Hard Park, and also that Saul Mamakwa would be here, but he's dealing with a death in the family and isn't able to attend. Kate and others talked about how the Premier was waiting to do Bill 5. This not really a reaction to Donald Trump, and I would agree with that because MPP Mamakwa and I were the leads on Bill 5, splitting that duty and speaking about what's going on with Bill 5. They proposed it, they actually announced the bill in Sudbury because it's a mining town, but they only talked about the one-stop shopping to help you with paperwork for mining. That's about 6 pages of this bill. This bill is about 209 pages. There are sections of this bill have nothing to do with mining at all, unless there's a mine site under Ontario Place, unless there's a mine site at the Dresden landfill. This is a goodie bag of the Premier's wishes. Even the context of the threat of Donald Trump and the need to get into the ring of fire as quickly as possible is laughable. Donald Trump will only be a premier for, Donald Trump will be president. I'm so Canadian. Donald Trump will only be the president for 3.5 more years. We won't even complete the road in that time. This is a pretext to run roughshod. The special economic zones that the Premier is proposing actually would allow the Premier to get away with the Greenbelt scandal, which he's under criminal investigation for today. This is not a government that can be trusted. When the Premier rammed through this power grab, First Nations leaders were very clear that they would not let the government trample over their rights. And they came here and they traveled many hours and thousands of kilometers to say that in person. And now they brought the fight here again. The Premier and Minister Lecce had many opportunities to fix this bill, and I want to be clear about that. First Nations came to Queen's Park to demand consultation in a bill that promises consultation. We moved motions to travel the bill to the north so that they could hear firsthand from the areas that are being affected. And the Premier, not specifically the Premier, but his cabinet members and committee rejected that motion. We moved motions as well to pause the committee. When early one morning, Minister Lecce sounded like he was trying to amend the bill and get it right. We moved a motion to pause committee so he could get it right. And I shared that with Minister Lecce first in a text, and then I spoke with him during question period, but they refused that opportunity as well. And we filibustered as much as possible on this bill. In return, the Conservative government time allocated the bill and forced it into a quick vote. Ultimately, they refused every opportunity to get this right. And instead of speeding up development, they were creating chaos, resistance, and resentment. The Conservative government is going to use taxpayer dollars to fight this. This is what they did when they fought the unconstitutional Bill 124. This is what they proposed to do for Bill 28, and this is what they've done in the past. They're going to use taxpayer dollars to fight a bad bill that was broken from the beginning. And we need a government that is laser focused on strengthening Ontario, bringing us together and making life more affordable. Not a government that's occupied with another legal challenge in court and fueling division. That's the last thing we need when we're against Trump's tariffs. The Ford government can do the right thing. They can listen to First Nations. They can kill Bill 5. It's what they should have done from the beginning. The Premier claims that he has the best interests of First Nations in mind, but fighting the very people he was elected to represent will only make our province weaker. And to be clear, we do want development in the province. Many of my colleagues on the stage today said that today. It's about doing it right. It's about representing and standing up for UNDRIP, recognizing our rights as treaty rights holders as well, that we signed promises. It's not their treaties, it's ours as well. And as elected representatives, we should be role models for the nation and for our province primarily about what consultation really looks like. Meaningful, true consultation and building in nation-nation relationships is what we should be doing and leading that way. And unfortunately, Minister Lecce, Minister Rickford, and Premier Ford are not doing that, and it's shameful. Thank you. Did you want me to call for questions?
We're available for questions, and I just wanted to point out my team. Nick Daub is co-counsel with me on this case, and Bianca Berganza is also on our team, and she can actually take questions in French if anybody has those. So welcome any questions from the floor.
Quick question for Chief June, if I can, if you don't mind. I think more so than anyone, you showed a lot of emotion while you were standing there speaking. I'm just wondering if you can help quantify these bills compared to other fights that you've had. Where does this sit?
Well, it's probably the worst two bills there's ever been. This is going to be complete destruction of the earth. In our territory, it's all mining, and in our territory, we also have spring water as drinking water. We have an esker that runs underneath our community. And I show a lot of emotion because that's what's at risk. And I mean, we live off the land. Still, to this day, people may not think so, but we live off the land. We eat the animals on the land. We fish. This is all natural for us. And this is all at risk. So this has got to be the worst. If we look at what's coming as a result of these bills, it's destruction. That esker won't exist. It will be contaminated. And that esker runs, it's pretty lengthy. So when I think about that, knowing that that's where I lived for my ancestors since time immemorial, and drank that very same water, and I know that that's going to be at risk, well, yes, it's very emotional for me.
Thank you. Just to follow up to any of the other chiefs that want to address this, there's also a summit taking place in Gatineau involving other chiefs from across the country, including Prime Minister Mark Carney. As a result of this going on here and the challenges that you're bringing forward legally, how does that impact the other discussions that will be taking place with the Prime Minister and others in Ottawa?
Can I just, others can speak, but we have a question for Prime Minister Carney and his cabinet. Will you remove Section 6 and 22 from the Building Canada Act? They're the absolute power sections. They're the sections that deem that any project that they put forward is going to be approved, and the section that allows cabinet to exempt projects from a broad sweep of other laws. The Carney government and the four governments have both said, don't worry, we'll consult with you. And parts of the Building Canada Act, the federal law, do provide for certain consultation up front. But it's almost meaningless, if not meaningless, to say that when other key core parts of the bill say, have you question, consult about what? If you're taking away all of the laws, approvals, and assessments, what are we going to talk about? What facts are going to be on the table for us to speak to? You're not fact gathering through assessments. You're not considering all of the things that these other laws that you'll exempt the project from need you to consider. So about what? How is that advancing engagement with First Nations? It sets it back 50 years prior to 1982, when Section 35 of the Constitution recognized and affirmed Indigenous rights. So if the federal government made a mistake, didn't realize what it was drafting, and it really does intend to fully engage with First Nations, not just at the beginning, but through all of the key life cycle of a project, to give First Nations the oversight and the say that they have a constitutional right to, then take out Sections 6 and 22. That's our demand and our request to Carney. And the chiefs that are going here, if they're allowed to speak, because at the summit, apparently the federal government is appointing but 2 chiefs per province to be able to speak at this summit. There's 134 First Nations in Ontario alone, so there's a lot that's not going to be heard. But depending on what they're prepared to listen to, we are asking them now publicly, are you prepared to fix this act to take out Section 6 and 22? If so, we may have something to talk to you about. If not, see you in court.
Just follow on with that, can we just clarify, are the chiefs who are here today attending the meeting in Gatineau? All of you are on your way to Gatineau, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, and is there a message that we've heard the message from the lawyer here, but anything else, if you get the chance to speak, what would you say to the Prime Minister?
Well, thank you for that question. I think ultimately, as First Nations, it's been our sacred duty to look after the earth, to live in harmony with Mother Nature. And what we're seeing already before these bills, before Bill C5, we've been seeing dedicated effort to strip and destroy the environment. And this is what we need to stop. Already we've been seeing the desecration and destruction of our burial sites. And this all happened before these bills came in. We need to be strengthening archaeological requirements. We need to ensure that our ancestors who haven't already been desecrated and destroyed in the lands need to be protected. With all the development you see in all the big cities here in Canada, we've already lost a lot of ancestors, and now we want to ensure that who we have left remains there, they stay there. We want to make sure that the species that exist now, the species that, who knows, might hold cures to cancer or disease, we can't just willy-nilly destroy those without even thinking about it. In Alderville First Nation, where we are, we have the Black Oak Savanna, where we've been spending I'm going to say, millions of dollars to protect the environment, to protect species at risk. And then you see these bills that are coming in doing the exact opposite. They're just destroying them without even thinking about it. So it's unfair that we are spending all of our time and efforts to protect the species on our territories when the bigger governments are doing everything possible to destroy them. So what we want to see is we want to see a reversal of what we've been seeing already in terms of destruction of the environment, of the ecology, of archaeology. We want to see more protections on that, not less protections. There is already a path to success economically. It's just a matter of following those steps that have already been established. It's lazy to say we are not going to follow all these laws that are all there for a reason. We need to say we are actually going to honor the laws that are on the books already, because there is a path to economic success. It's just a matter of doing the hard work that it takes to make sure you're doing it properly. And this is where these bills are lazy bills, because they don't want to have to put that hard work in. People in Canada have elected their politicians to do what is best for Canada, and these two bills are not what's best for Canada. It's not just First Nations that should be fighting these bills, it's all Canadians that should be fighting these bills.
Can someone also address just there's 9 First Nations on this legal application?
Yes.
Why only 9? Is there a hope that other First Nations will join? Or I know that many of the nations here obviously have histories and have had conflicts in the past and have their own stories and narratives and so on. But is there a hope that more will join, or is this sort of the vanguard that you guys have put forward?
I can't speak to that entirely, but I'd imagine that every single First Nation is against this. I've never heard of a First Nation or a chief saying we are for Bill 5 or Bill C5. I think just to get the litigation moving, we have to start somewhere, but it'd be my guess that every First Nation would ideally want to be joined in on this fight. You saw the rallies out in Queen's Park. You saw the rallies at Parliament Hill in Ottawa. We are united. We are unanimous against these bills. So you will not find a chief or a First Nation citizen who is for these bills anywhere.
Chief Taylor, you said you were in the meeting with Doug Ford. Did you see a man who was listening when you were in that meeting?
When we met with Doug Ford, that was one day after he made those hat-in-hand comments. So unfortunately, that discussion probably took up more time than we would have liked, because we did, secure that apology from Doug Ford. He said that he misspoke. And when I talked to him, I felt like instead of talking business about talking Bill 5, I needed to address why we have UNDRIP, why we have duty to consult, why we have these protections. So I went with a historic lesson. So instead of talking about business, I was talking about history. I think that the Bill 5 discussion got a little bit hijacked by those comments.
Doug Ford apologised that you mentioned his environment minister had to apologise last week as well. Is the government being ignorant in its approach to this topic?
I think that in ignorance in terms of being less informed about all the issues, I would say that they're less informed. I believe they need to do some homework on these issues. They need to go back to the history books. They need to listen to elders. They need to listen to the First Nations. And they need to understand why we are in a country called Canada that has treaties with First Nations, where these treaties were not land surrenders. They were agreements to allow the colonists to live on our territories. So when we're talking about the destruction of these lands, we're talking about the destruction of our lands. And they have no right to do that.
Chief, and to any of the other chiefs who want to speak to it, both government had said it, but the Ford government in particular has been adamant that the consultations will happen throughout the summer. They say they have begun and are continuing. Are you attending these consultations? Are you hearing anything? How is that going at all?
I believe that these consultations, a lot of them would be the piecemeal ones where you have proponents that are consulting with the First Nations. Now, when you talk about consulting, we should have been consulted on the Bill 5 legislation, on the drafting of that bill from day one. That's where consultation is. You don't have consultation after the fact. And the fact that it was pushed through in less than a month shows that there were weaknesses. If it was a strong bill, there would have been robust discussion and debate on it. But when you're not sure about your bill, bill when you don't think it's going to pass, that's when you rush it through and you stop that debate. So I think the provincial government understands that it was a weak bill, that it's a bill that people would be opposed to, and that's why they pushed it through so fast. And now they're saying that we're going to consult with you after that bill has been passed.
But to be clear, is there any dialogue going on right now in the communities?
Well, I wouldn't say that there is per se on the large provincial framework or even the federal framework. We are dealing with individual proponents of industry who want to, do business on our territory. So we've had a number of proponents come up to us and say that Bill 5 and Bill C5 don't change anything. They have a relationship with us that we've earned, and we respect each other. So those people say, we're not changing anything because of the bill. We are going to do consultation properly. We are going to do engagement with the communities properly, and we are going to take your concerns seriously. So in a lot of ways, it's going to be up to those individual proponents, those individual corporations doing business on our territories that are going to drive the indicators of how Bill 5 and Bill C5 are going to be affecting us in future development.
This is for any of the chiefs, but after Bill 5 passed, there was talk of Idle No More 2, of blockades, of disruptive protests. Does this lawsuit come instead of that, do you think, or do you think that is still something that's very much on the table while this goes forward?
Well, I don't want to speak for all the chiefs here, but I think that we're still gauging what's happening here. We don't have all the information. We've heard those nice words from the Premier that they are going to engage. So I don't think we've seen any direct action per se in our territory that would cause us to take actions like that. But of course, indeed, we are prepared for all circumstances. We're going to ensure that our lands are protected. And if we see something happening, we're going to make sure that that problem is rectified. I'm sure that maybe there's other chiefs that want to stand up here. Miigwech.
To answer your question, what I would say to Carney is that we need to work together. Okay, we have always worked together, and we need to continue to work together. And to answer, who had the question over here? No, the one before. Okay, with the we haven't had any consultation as of yet. I know that in our area, the municipalities have met, and we were not at that table. There was no invitation extended to us to sit at that table. So why do we bother with reconciliation? We have been working towards reconciliation for the past how many years have we been talking? And now it's economic reconciliation. How can we possibly have that if we're not at those tables with those municipalities? Because those municipalities are supposed to be working with us, the First Nations. And we're not even at the table. So that answers that. And yours was? Your
2.0 in terms of disruptive protests alongside this legal action.
Well, every First Nation is different. We can't answer that. That is a question that would have to be, for my First Nation, at this point, I mean, when you're looking at water that's at risk, what would you do? What would you do if there was spring water at risk that had been there for since time immemorial? Now, I also want to mention hat in hand, okay? Something that Canada's got to remember, everyone has to know this, is that there is a revenue account. Okay, for First Nation people, we have a revenue account. There's no hat in hand here. That revenue account is for us, First Nation people. That's part of the treaty. There's a treaty here, right? First Nation people, this was the country that we were the original occupants of this land. So I just wanted to make that final comment. Thank you.
Question for Kate. Can you tell us
I just wanted to talk to.
Sorry.
I just wanted to answer the question about what I say to Prime Minister Carney. I would ask him, where's the honor of the crown? In my community, I have years and years of dishonorment, of things that have not been honored as a treaty signature to Treaty Number 9. We have many things that we've been going without. We have bridges in our community that cannot be fixed. And, you know, we've struck a working group in my community with Canada and Ontario, and Canada can't even sign off on stupid terms of reference for us. Where's the honor? That has to change. And in regards to Doug Ford and consultation, there has not been anything in regards to Bill 5 in my community from them. And his hat in hand remarks and his apology is empty and meaningless unless he has action behind it. That's what I want to tell him.
Chief Taylor. I believe your First Nation has an agreement with the federal government to kind of, among other First Nations, to develop roads in your area. Do you feel that this litigation might challenge the kind of the agreement you have with the federal
I don't
government?
have an agreement with them. You have the wrong community. Yeah.
That's not the case.
I just want to make that clear. There's no consultation. There's no meaningful consultation with us as First Nations, and that's why I'm here.
Okay, can you tell us what the next steps are? Dates, this proceedings begun, what's next?
Just on the consultation. So it's important that we don't throw words around and then stop. We don't throw the word reconciliation or consultation around. It's a bad practice of all of us to just throw sentences and phrases out there without really looking behind what they mean. Consultation in Canada has been the law articulated since 1997, so almost 30 years ago, must be involving First Nations in decisions that might adversely affect their way of life on their lands, to the point where their concerns are being substantially addressed, okay? It's not just sitting down and talking. It's working through issues, identifying problems, identifying concerns, and then working through how they will be addressed. Sometimes that means a project can't go ahead because the only way to address it is to say no. In the 1997 case I'm talking about, the court said sometimes it means no. That was a Delgamuc decision, the Supreme Court of Canada. It means, even if it's not no, how can bad things be, negative impacts be avoided, if not fully avoided, mitigated, if not what's left behind, then compensated for, so that there's mutual benefit and not just all the burden shoved on the first peoples of this land. So on reconciliation, I want to address that terminology as well. It means carving space for mutual determination, okay? Mutual determination. We're not very good at this in this country, where we think that First Nations are peripheral, that it's you know, the treaty promises that we're talking about are promises that the Crown governments would share the land respectfully with First Nations, share the governance over the land respectfully with First Nations. It's about mutual determination. We haven't seen that ever in this country, except for when the governors, the Crown representatives first came here. But since the War of 1812, when First Nations were fighting with the Crown against Americans, and that war ended, the Crown governments abruptly abandoned First Nations and said, we don't need you anymore as allies in battle. We don't need you anymore to show us how to survive on this land because our settler populations are now outnumbering yours. So screw you. And proceeded to do so for the last 150 years, 200 years actually. So this is, reconciliation means fixing that and doing what was always supposed to have been done. Mutual determination, mutual engagement. And therefore consultation has to be toward that. It's not enough after a law is passed that provides these sweeping powers to say, well, I'll talk to you. About what? How? To what effect? How can we trust that you're going to do something on the one hand, when on the other hand, you've given yourselves these sweeping powers to wipe out the application of a bunch of laws around which we would be engaged and consulted, right? It doesn't make any sense. Also, I will say the only thing that the Ford government has promised, if you can believe anything that he says, to consult is the location of special economic zones, not the projects that would happen within them. So it's like throwing a dart at a map and saying, I'm going to consult you about where that dart lands. And we all know where those darts are headed, some of them at least. Not about what might happen there and how. So let's be clear what's being supposedly promised. It's empty. What happens next in this case is we are right now publicly, and we will do so in a follow-up when we find out who the lawyers assigned for Canada and Ontario are, is say to them, are you prepared to fix these? Are you prepared to fix the bill in Canada by removing the offending sections? And in Bill 5, are you prepared to take it away? And if you want more streamlined decision-making with First Nations at the table, then we'll work with you on that new bill. So these are offers that we're putting out there, and we'll see how genuine either of those governments are by their response to that. Following that, we will be preparing our evidence, which in a case like this goes in writing, affidavit evidence, and they'll respond accordingly. This is a fast-track case, applications are. I can't tell you exactly how long it will take because it depends on what the two other parties do, but we could be at a hearing on this within a year, could be. It might also take longer depending on what Canada and Ontario seek to do. I will also note one last thing. If those two governments do not pay attention to what's in this case and what the First Nation chiefs have been saying for weeks now, and proceed to barrel on ahead with, declaring a bunch of national or any national interest project without First Nations consent, if they barrel on ahead to wipe out protections for Indigenous species, for the ancestors in the land, to declare special economic zones or any aspect of Bill 5, then there's a good chance we'll end up in court seeking an injunction. So I can't imagine, based on what a number of chiefs have said already, that direct action won't happen and action in court. You can expect to see likely both over the coming months if these governments do not wake up and realize what they have done is defile, honor Canadian values, First Nation rights, and Mother Earth. So we hope they wake up and see this.
Is there any precedent for a case like this? Any sort of other cases that you're modeling this one after, perhaps?
Well, there's all kinds of cases on constitutional challenges to strike out laws based on not. In Canada, all laws that are passed by any Crown government must meet the requirements of the Constitution. So there's all kinds of cases on constitutional challenges. Two of the grounds here are charter challenges based on violation of First Nations persons' rights to security of the person. These do such damage to social, psychological, physical, and cultural well-being. There's such fear and threat brought about by these bills that it's a violation of security of the person. It's also a violation of the rights of equality of Indigenous persons because these laws will profoundly affect First Nations worse than others. But the bigger part of the case is it's a violation of the Crown's obligation to First Nations to act honorably. There are cases to that effect, but the notice of application references a case from 2018, Supreme Court of Canada, Mikisew case, where at first glance it looks like it's forbidding this kind of a case. It says that the Crown governments don't have an obligation to consult and accommodate First Nations when Crown governments make and pass legislation. We think that decision was wrong-headed. The Supreme Court is part of the structure of Canadian law that has a lot to learn about what it means to be a colonizing force that needs to decolonialize. But that very same case actually left the door open for us to bring this case, and by saying, well, maybe the duty to consult as a slice of what honorable conduct means doesn't apply. But honorable conduct does apply somehow. They didn't define how in the making and passing of Crown legislation. And so we brought this case we walked through that door that the Supreme Court left open, deliberately left open in 2018, and said, well, what clearly it requires is that the content of bills and the process to make them must not set back reconciliation. It must, in fact, advance reconciliation. And if you can look at what happened in the process leading to these bills and the content of them, they both severely set back reconciliation. That's not honorable. Therefore, we're following that part of the precedent set by the Mikisew decision in 2018.
Just the piece on how this all came together in the application. Can you give us some details on who approached who? There's 9 First Nations a part of it, of course, but were there First Nations that declined to be a part of it at this stage?
Oh, I can't tell you that. Those discussions are privileged. But, I've worked for all of these First Nations before. So, as a lawyer, I can't easily just sort of cold call up First Nations that have other legal counsel. So I'm somewhat restricted in the reach out that we could do. This is also a fast track case. We have to launch it quickly. I didn't have time, my firm didn't have time to do a full scale reach out, so we started, as was mentioned, with this core group. Others are welcome to join, other First Nations, but I want to be clear about this. I don't really think that it's well understood what living and breathing in crisis means. If you're living and breathing many days in crisis and in crisis management because you can't drink the water out of your taps, or you're going through suicide epidemic again, or the youth are in despair and dropping out of high school because they don't feel the curriculum is suited to them. You just feel that there's no sense of control over your fate and future as a people or as a community. Then you're dealing constantly with the next crisis after the next. And many First Nations, we shouldn't expect them to jump to the fore, crack the whip, jump, how high. No, that's not the way life works when you're dealing in constant crisis and crisis management. Some First Nations, some of the time, can step forward, and many others often can't because they're dealing in crisis of one sort or the other. I would never expect many First Nations to be able to be contacted and make a decision that quickly. And so these 9 were, for a variety of reasons, able to, and we knew we had to launch right away, and we did. But we'll see if others join later. It's not a comment on whether or not, as has been indicated, others support this. I don't know of a single First Nation that doesn't support this case. So.
And you mentioned, that you're waiting for the feds and the province to assign lawyers to the case, so you haven't heard anything officially back?
No, we have not.
To go back to the Chiefs for a second, maybe I could hear more about the specific concerns about how mining or other resource extraction could affect your territories, particularly maybe Chief Taylor or Chief Black, because you guys are both a little farther north.
Can you let me know? Say the question again, please.
How might mining or other types of resource extraction affect your territories?
Well, in my area, there's hundreds of mining claims. We're in the middle of a treaty land entitlement negotiation in Ganugami. When all of these mining permits are provided to them, that limits us and what we're able to do at that table. We're not able to have any type of land settlement back to our community. That's land back to my community. That's a treaty land entitlement where that land should be brought back to my community. And this process that we have in place right now under Ontario, it limits us and it affects us deeply. We have people that we don't have the capacity at home. Ontario, they have all kinds of sorts of people that work on files for mining. They have policy developers. They have people that look after all of the claims. You know, those things already, those processes that are in place right now, don't do anything for us as a First Nation, but limit us on what we're able to do out there on the land. They go out, there's like claims out there that we don't want to have out there on sacred lands. We've had to already put an injunction in. Ganugamin has done that to protect sacred lands. We snooze again. So we have to put our money towards protecting those sites, because Ontario doesn't even listen or want to listen to any of our protocols or our laws. Anything that we have in place and the way we want to be engaged, those things are just ignored. So yes, there's a big effect out there in regards to mining. Thank you.
So just to give you an idea of how we're impacted, we have 40,000 active mining claims in our territory. 225 claim staking notifications so far in 2025. So if you were to see the map, you would, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So in our area, okay, we have the highway is known as the Golden Highway, and there's a reason for that. We're surrounded by gold. So how's this going to impact us? Well, what do you think? We're going to have massive holes everywhere surrounding us. Thank you.
If I can ask a legal question in French, Bianca, if you can speak to it. Les principes légaux au cœur de l'affaire, on entend d'un côté qu'il y a une question constitutionnelle et qu'il y a la conduite que vous dites déshonorable de la part de la couronne. Pouvez-vous m'expliquer lequel des la distinction entre les deux, en fait?
Donc, il s'agit de différents principes légaux. Donc, l'honneur de la couronne, c'est un principe qui se comporte dans toutes les interactions que la couronne a avec les Premières Nations. Mais, similairement, avec l'obligation de consulter et accommoder, c'est à faire avec les décisions qui affectent les Premières Nations, les décisions de leur vie et de leur territoire. Donc, il y a des différentes méthodes légales qu'on applique, les deux principes. Et dans ce cas-ci, avec cette contestation juridique, on dit que dès le début, la création de ces lois, Bill 5 et Bill C5, jusqu'aux implémentations, dès que les lois se sont devenues des lois, il n'y avait pas de consultation ni d'accommodation des Premières Nations. Ils n'étaient pas aux tables. Ils n'étaient pas engagés comme partenaires avec les conversations avec le gouvernement d'Ontario et le gouvernement canadien. Et aussi, dans l'esprit de réconciliation, il n'y avait pas l'honneur de la couronne. Donc, il n'y avait pas, ainsi que l'obligation de consulter et accommoder, il n'y avait pas ce principe fondamental qui est reconnu par la Cour suprême du Canada, les gouvernements d'Ontario et du Canada aussi, et des Nations unies, qu'il faut engager avec les Premières Nations, il faut intégrer leur perspective, leur voix dans le processus dès la création d'une loi jusqu'à l'implémentation de la loi.
Et en d'autres mots, si vous pouvez résumer là, très brièvement, de quoi vous espérez convaincre la juge ou le juge?
Les lois, comme ils sont maintenant, sont inconstitutionnelles. Donc, le gouvernement du Canada et le gouvernement d'Ontario doivent abroger ou doivent changer ces lois pour que ce soit en ligne avec la Charte, la Constitution, la Déclaration des Nations unies sur les peuples autochtones. Donc, ils doivent faire des changements et ces changements doivent commencer par consulter et avoir les Premières Nations comme partenaires à la table.
Final question, anybody? Because some of the chiefs have to get going.
I have another legal questions for either of you. Are the legal grounds, legal principles at play exactly the same for both bills?
The absolute power stuff, yes, but there's also a bunch of things we're attacking in Bill 5, the provincial bill, that aren't in the federal bill. So that notice of application goes through the common attack, which is this absolute power aspect of both, which is why the notice of application indicates that those key provisions in the federal law need to be struck, not necessarily the whole thing. Bill 5 is so fundamentally flawed in that way, but all these other ways, the changes to the Endangered Species Act, the Ontario Heritage Act, the Mining Act, various other things, that the whole thing has to go. So there is a common core, the grounds are the same there, and then there's additional grounds to attack Bill 5. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.